Now that's one method of solving for the variable when I have fractions outside of parentheses. The next method that I want to show you uses the idea that if I have 5 times 3 times 4, then I can choose to multiply the 3 times 4 first, or I can choose to multiply the 5 times 3 first, or I can choose to multiply the 5 times 4 first. But I won't, because they're all being multiplied, I will not multiply 5 times 3 and then also multiply 5 times 4. That's important because that's a common error that we make when we're trying to work these kind of problems. So if I choose to multiply the 5 and the 3 first, I would get 15, and then this result is what I'll multiply by the 4 to come out with 60. Okay, this idea is what I'm going to use here on this problem. So I have 4/5 z plus 1. Do you see that I have a number multiplied by a quantity, just like this 3 times the quantity of 4? And then negative 2/5 times z plus 5. Same thing on the right hand side. I have a negative number multiplied by a quantity, just like I had a number multiplied by a quantity here. When I look at my two fractions, they both have a denominator of 5, so I'd like to multiply both sides by that 5. So I have 5 over 1, and on the right hand side 5 over 1. I'm going to multiply each side by that common denominator of 5. Now remember, I can choose to multiply these first two together and then multiply the result by the quantity, and that's what I'm going to do here. These will reduce and I'm left with a 4. That's my result that I want to multiply by the quantity z plus 1. Now on the right hand side, I'm going to choose to multiply these two together and multiply the result of this product by the quantity here. So when I multiply these two, my 5's reduce and I just have a negative 2 times the quantity z plus 5. Now that made it fairly easy, fairly quickly. It's a little less complicated than the method I used over here. So let's take a look. When I distribute that 4 and the negative 2, it should very quickly start looking like this problem at this level. Then I have 4z plus 4 equals negative 2z minus 10. I'm distributing that whole negative 2 inside the parentheses. Then I am exactly at this level, so now I'll add 2z, subtract 4. If I do that all together, I have 6z equals negative 14. Divide both sides by 6, and z equals, if I reduce again by 2 for each of them, negative 7/3. Okay, now on this problem I actually solved it two different ways and came up with the same answer, so I'm fairly certain that my answer is correct. I don't need to do an additional check. And we'll slide up here and take a look at this last problem. This one has some larger denominators, and it may not be as simple to find my least common denominator like I did on the very first problem by looking at multiples of the largest number. I'll eventually get there, but I want to show you one other method that works just as well. I can look at each of the numbers that are my denominators and factor them. So I'm going to use factor trees and factor each of the numbers. So 40, I just pick a random pair that I know multiplies to 40. I'm thinking 4 and 10, so I'll use that. And then 4 multiplies, or is divisible by 2, and it's 2 times 2. 10 is the same as 2 times 5. So now I have a list of prime factors that multiply up to give me 40. 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 5 is 40. Over here on the 30, I can do a similar thing. 3 times 10, and 3 is prime, so I have to stop there. 10 is the same as 2 times 5, So now I have a list of numbers that should multiply to give me 30. 3 times 2 is 6, times 5 is 30. And then the 6, I'll do the same thing, and it's 3 times 2, or 2 times 3, to give me 6. And both of those are prime, so I'll stop there. To form my LCD then, I take the list for 40. The very first denominator, I just take the entire list as it is. I need a 2 times 2 times 2 times 5. 3 2's and a 5. I take them all because I need them to represent the 40. Then for the 30, I need a 2, I need a 5, and I need a 3. I have a 2 right there, and I have a 5 right there that I can share, but I don't have a 3 yet, so I need to put a 3 onto my list. Then the last denominator is 6, so I need a 2 times 3. So I look back at my list. I have a 2 and I have a 3 now, and those two I can share. I don't have to put anything additional onto my list. So when I multiply these all together, 2 times 2 is 4, times 2 is 8, times 5 is 40, times 3 is 120. So my least common denominator is 120. Now back to my original problem. I'm looking at the equal sign to make sure that what I want to do is really legal, and what I want to do is multiply both sides by this least common denominator so that I can get rid of all of my fractions. And I do have an equal sign, so I can multiply the right hand side by 120 and multiply the left hand side by 120. Now remember, I have to distribute here because I have one term here and one term here, and each one has to be multiplied by this 120. So I multiply 120 times 2w minus 1 over 40, and I take this. This is a good time for me to move this minus also. I want to move this minus up to the numerator, and it has to distribute to the first one and to the second one, so that second one becomes a plus now. So then I have plus 120 times negative 2w plus 3 over 30 equals 2w minus 3 over 6 times 120 over 1. Now 40 goes into 120 3 times, 30 goes into 120 4 times, and 6 goes into 120 20 times. So all my fractions reduce, and I'm left without any denominators other than 1, and I can just distribute this 3 onto the original numerator, and the same with this 4 onto the next numerator, and the same with the 20 onto the last numerator. Now when I distribute here, I get 6w minus 3, and I have a plus 4 times a negative 2w, so I get negative 8w, and then a plus 4 times a positive 3, so plus 12, equals, on the right hand side, 2 times 20 times w, so 40w minus 3 times 20, which would be minus 60. Now I have no fractions left, so I'm really just trying to get all my variables onto one side and all my numbers onto the other side. But on the left hand side, I have some like terms I'd like to combine. There's a 6w and a negative 8w, there's a negative 3 and a positive 12. So I'd like to combine my like terms. 6w minus 8w, negative 2w, minus 3 plus 12, it'll be plus 9, equals 40w minus 60. Now I can add 2w to both sides and add 60 to both sides. And I'm doing it kind of backwards from how I usually do because I can see that my w's will come out positive if I move them to the right. It doesn't matter, it'll work out the same if you do it to the left. You'll just have a negative and it'll have to divide out in the end. On the left hand side, negative 2w and positive 2w gives me 0. 9 plus 60 gives me 69. And then I have 40W plus 2W is 42W,